Hello everyone, thank you very much for stopping by and returning to the old world. Today we're having a look at my latest acquisition for the Dwarf Army, and these are some Deathseekers. They are produced by Highland Miniatures, or rather the STLs are, as these are 3D prints. Now, not having a 3D printer, I purchased these through Etsy from a company called The Plastic Clinic. So let's have a look. I did buy a unit of 20 of the Deathseekers. These are, as I say, part of the Sons of Ymir range from Highland Miniatures. Coming in quite a nice range of different poses. Enough to have the ranks generally with different poses in them, giving them a nice non-uniform look. Appreciate by looking at these, some of the quality is going to be down to Highland Miniatures and some of it will be very much down to the printing. Overall, I'm pretty happy with how these came out. What did strike me originally, as you can see here, is one model is a different colour to all of the others. This surprised me somewhat because I thought a company printing stuff out would be using the same resin, which I'd expect to come out as the same colour and for that to be fairly consistent. However, giving the model a bit of a prod, it doesn't feel any different to the others, so it may just be it's come out a different colour. Whatever the reason, I think it will be fine once it's paid back. Now, one of the things I have found with these miniatures is some of the, well, what effectively acts like a mould line from the printing, because they're not multi-part plastic kits, which you can move around in lots of different ways in order to try and get at the lines. Some of these have been really difficult for me to get my tools in at, so I've not been as effective of cleaning them up as perhaps I would have liked. And one of the other downsides of these figures, you can't really see very clearly on this, hopefully will come into focus, but there are definite print lines on the axe heads. Camera unfortunately not picking them up, but it's something that's very apparent in person, and attacking them with a file doesn't seem to help very much. There's lots of tiny little ridges that really do show out. That aside, the musculature, I think, of the models is pretty good. The general look of the models I'm pretty happy with. So it'd be interesting to see how they paint up. Obviously, with them being, well, lots of flesh on display, it's going to be really important to get my skin tone game on par to make these figures look decent. I'm also, having said that, not particularly experienced with painting orange, so we'll see how that goes with the hair. Ulf awoke, his body damp with sweat. It was the dream, always the dream. A dream of the day that had changed his life forever. It had been a sunny day, and the sunlight had glinted off the helmets, shields, armour and weapons of the clansmen of Carrickhairn as they marched down the road. And then it happened. A force of orcs broke from hiding and advanced upon them. In a moment of precision, the dwarf force turned. With a crash, the shields came together, forming a shield wall, a wall of steel, leather and wood for the orcs to die upon. And so it seemed that this battle was predetermined, and the dwarves would surely be successful against their ancestral enemy. But the leader of the orc force had been cunning, and around the flank surged goblin cavalry, mounted on the largest spiders Ulf had ever seen. Creatures with far too much hair, too many eyes, and far too many legs. As the spiders circled, younger, less experienced members of the dwarven force started to try and turn to meet this new threat. The shield wall started to lose its structure, and the orcs charged. All around Ulf was chaos, as dwarf and greenskin fought axe to scimitar, shields bashing into bodies, friends cut down in the prime of their life. The dwarves started to break. Seeing a brother cut down before him, Ulf turned and fled. It was later that night, alone and around a makeshift fire, that Ulf realised the full extent of what he'd done. Rather than be cut down with his brother, his cousins, his friends, he'd brought shame not only on himself, his family, but his ancestors. Pulling out his knife, Ulf took the only action he was able to. He shaved his head, all but a small tuft in a Mohican. At the time, he took an oath. He would never run again, no matter how scared he was, no matter how horrendous and suicidal the situation. He would stand his ground. He would fight to the last. He would redeem his honour and be able to be welcomed into the halls of his ancestors. Since then, Ulf had moped around the mountains and the woodlands of his home, never finding the doom he believed awaited him. And so he began his travels, heading north, looking for the small, more isolated holds where danger lurked behind every rock and every piece of cover. Here surely he can find a death that would make a difference to his fellow dwarves and save lives with his own passing. It was not long after reaching the hold of Thorgrim Leifson that Ulf realised he was not the only one to have had the same thought. And a small band of slayers gathered together, offering their service to the Lord, to seek out the most dangerous enemies he had and defeat them or die in the attempt. Let's have a look at how they finished off, and overall I'm pretty happy with them. This being a series of models where there's a lot of skin on display, I thought it would be a good opportunity to try and save a bit of time and use some contrast. I don't use contrast very often, so I started off by spraying the models black and then went heavy overbrush with white because I know contrast doesn't go well on a black base. Then attacked it with Guilliman Flesh. Having looked at that, I didn't think it looked quite what I wanted it to, and I also thought my more normal highlighting techniques wouldn't work brilliantly with it, so I gave the models then a wash with the Reikland Flesh Shade before glazing up with very thin down Cadian Flesh and Kislev Flesh. This gave me the finished look you have in front of you. Now, a couple of the miniatures did need the muscles painting in manually at the back, but it's on there smaller the back, so I'm less concerned about that. The orange is also a contrast, so the hair and the beards. It's the dark orange, orange, something like that, I can't remember off the top of my head. And then I've given a highlight of red leather, which is a Vallejo paint. Red leather I've also used on the grips, on the weapon hafts, so it kind of ties together across different parts of the model. Other than that, it's just some usual painting, wash, highlight sort of job, and the models are based using Geek Gaming Scenics Mediterranean colour basing material to tie them in with the rest of the army. So overall, as I say, yeah, I'm pretty pleased with how they've come out, and I'm looking forward to getting the full unit ready. But how do they look like stacked up against other models that'll be taking part in my army? Here we see them ranked up along a range of other models. So here we see an Oathmark Dwarf Archer, so the kind of model that's going to be counts as crossbowmen. They're not dissimilar sort of sizes yet. Figure's not completely painted, but for size purposes, I think it shows it works quite nicely. Both the models are a little bit taller than the next model along, going from your left to right, which is a Games Workshop bolt thrower crewman. They won't be in the same unit as the other models, being as they're just going to be linked up with the war machines. Hopefully they'll look a little bit less standoutish once they're all on 25mm bases. Next along the line, we've got a very old classic dwarf model. Now, I think this just shows that Games Workshop models have increased in size over the years. It's a figure I painted decades ago, and it's not one that will be making the cut for my final army. The models in this pose, I've only got about 8 of them anyway. So the size difference doesn't really matter so much here. Next along the ranks, and again bringing in one of the Deathseekers, you can see a Games Workshop metal runesmith. They're not massively different size-wise, so I think they can sit alongside each other fairly nicely. The height difference, I think probably a large part of that is actually going to be those big hair crests that are going on. So there you see the Highland Miniatures. They were printed in 32mm, so there was an option from the Plastic Clinic to do it in 28 or 32mm, I think. I opted for 32, thinking it would fit in better with the other models, and I think, yeah, that's turned out quite nicely. Final word, I think, perhaps on the Plastic Clinic. So they do have quite an interesting special offer at the moment. Don't know how long it will carry on, whether it will carry on indefinitely. What they've said is if you buy some stuff from them, paint it up, put it on Instagram and link them, to tag them, whatever you do on the old Instagram. If they're satisfied at your complete order, they will give you a voucher for 5% off. This is to help combat the Grey Mountain and buying lots of models that you can't really get round to painting and using. So that's a nice idea, plus it gives them a little bit of free advertising on Instagram. Mention that purely by the way of completeness. The Plastic Clinic have nothing to do with this video other than being the supplier of the Deathseekers. They don't know the video is being made. I've got no incentive from them in order to talk about their models. It's just to chart how I'm getting on with my particular army and what I think about the products that I'm using. So that is it for today. Thank you very much for listening. If you've enjoyed this video and perhaps others like it, do consider subscribing and also liking the video. All helps. All that remains to say is, once again, thank you for listening. I am Return to the Old World. Have a great day.